They listened carefully during negotiations and observed patiently during debates. They asked simple questions about logistics, communication standards, and shared infrastructure. Other species argued about territory and firepower. Humans spoke about coordination, stability, and long-term consequences. Most delegates ignored them. Silence was easily mistaken for weakness. Only a few ancient beings noticed something troubling. The Eldari archivists, whose memories stretched across extinct civilizations, recognized the pattern. They had seen species like this before, ones that learned the true cost of endless war and survived by choosing restraint. Their warning was archived and forgotten. Human history remained sealed. What little was known was carefully filtered. In truth, humanity had nearly destroyed itself long before reaching the stars. From catastrophe and regret, they learned that winning wars often meant losing the future. Instead of perfecting weapons, humans studied how wars functioned. They learned that every conflict depended on fragile systems. Break those systems, and war collapsed on its own. When humans joined the galaxy, this was no longer theory. It was doctrine. The silent species took its place among the stars, patient and observant, while the galaxy mistook restraint for weakness, never realizing silence was a choice. The border conflict began as most interstellar wars did, with loud speeches and rapid mobilization. Two neighboring powers, eager to prove their dominance, fought over a chain of resource-rich systems. Fleets gathered, weapons were armed, and propaganda flooded the galaxy. Each side promised a decisive victory. When fighting began, it was brutal, chaotic, and exactly what the Galactic Assembly expected. Within days, the war threatened to spread. Trade routes collapsed, neutral systems were endangered, and refugees began to flee. Reluctantly, the Assembly sought outside help. Powerful empires refused, unwilling to weaken themselves. Someone suggested the humans, almost as an afterthought. They were nearby, neutral, and unlikely to escalate the conflict. The request to Earth was precise: limited support only. Medical aid, evacuation logistics, reconstruction planning. No combat involvement. Humanity accepted without hesitation. Their ships arrived swiftly, but stayed away from battle lines. They positioned themselves near civilian worlds, establishing hospitals, relief corridors, and communication hubs. Human engineers stabilized failing stations. Human doctors treated wounded soldiers from both sides equally. To observers, it seemed predictable, humans assisting while others fought. Then subtle problems appeared. Supply convoys began arriving late, then not at all. Orders reached fleets out of sequence or corrupted. Movement slowed as commanders hesitated. No sabotage was detected. No known cyber weapons were found. The disruptions were quiet, but multiplied rapidly. Frustration spread. Officers blamed one another. Morale dropped as soldiers waited for orders that never came or arrived too late. Battles ended not with defeat but confusion. Neither side could coordinate well enough to continue. Behind the scenes, human analysts worked silently. They shared efficiency models with both governments, suggesting improvements to logistics and communication. The models were flawless. What the empires failed to see was that these optimizations removed redundancy, making their war systems fragile. Small disruptions caused total collapse. Within 6 standard days, the war was over. No surrender, no victory. Fleets withdrew, economies strained, governments stood exhausted and confused. The disputed systems remained untouched. When the Assembly demanded answers, the human envoy replied calmly, "We did not end the war. We made it impossible to continue." For the first time, the galaxy feared not human weapons, but human understanding. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly was called less than a cycle after the border war collapsed. Delegates filled the chamber with unease instead of confidence. No victory celebrations had followed the conflict. No conquered worlds, no triumphant fleets. Two powerful empires had simply stalled. Their military still existed. Their weapons remained intact. Yet neither could explain how their war had unraveled so completely. All eyes turned toward the human delegation. The council demanded transparency. Accusations were carefully phrased, but the meaning was clear. Had humanity interfered beyond its mandate? Had it violated neutrality? The humans did not deny involvement. They only rejected the word interference. The human envoy spoke slowly, choosing each word with precision. They explained that what the galaxy called war was not defined by explosions or casualties. War was a process, a system that required coordination, belief, and sustained momentum. Soldiers needed to trust orders. Commanders needed reliable information. Economies needed to feed the machine of conflict. Break any one of those pillars and war weakened. Break all of them together and war ceased to function. The chamber grew quiet as the implications settled in. Humans revealed fragments of their doctrine, enough to be understood, but not enough to be copied. They described how centuries of internal conflict had taught them that destroying armies only created enemies, while destroying systems removed the ability to fight altogether. Their goal was never domination. It was prevention through inevitability. Several delegates objected, arguing that such methods were more dangerous than open warfare. The humans did not disagree. They admitted that their approach carried enormous responsibility. That was precisely why they avoided using it. An Eldari archivist requested the floor. With permission granted, they shared ancient records long sealed from public access. The records described civilizations that had followed similar paths, species that had learned to end wars without battles. Every one of those civilizations had eventually been erased, not by enemies, but by fear. Others had outlawed them, isolated them, or destroyed them before their methods could be turned outward. The archivist turned toward the human delegation. "You chose silence," they said. "You chose restraint. That is why you still exist." The humans did not respond. By the end of the session, the assembly understood a terrifying truth. Humans did not escalate conflict. They absorbed it, studied it, and quietly dismantled it from within. Traditional deterrence meant nothing to a species that did not seek victory or territory. As the delegates departed, one unspoken question lingered in the chamber. If humanity had revealed only a fraction of what it knew, what had it chosen to keep hidden? The first direct attack on a human colony came without any declaration of war. It was a calculated probe by a mid-tier empire that believed the stories of human restraint were exaggerated. The colony was small, placed near a minor trade corridor, lightly defended and focused on data infrastructure rather than weapons. To the attackers, it seemed like an easy victory and a perfect test of a widely whispered theory. Their fleets entered the system, expecting resistance or negotiations. Instead, they found silence, no challenge signals, no military formations. The colony's orbital platforms powered down visible defenses and began broadcasting evacuation channels. Civilians were moved into shelters as human ships withdrew deeper into the system, avoiding confrontation entirely. The invading commanders took this as proof that humans would not fight. Then the signal was sent. It was not a weapon by any known definition. No energy surge, no spatial distortion, nothing detectable on standard sensors. The transmission lasted less than a second, hidden within normal background data. To the attackers, it appeared meaningless. Hours later, small issues began to surface. Navigation systems required constant recalibration. Command updates lagged behind real-time events. Automated targeting systems began demanding manual confirmation. Each problem alone was manageable, but together they slowed every decision. As the fleet advanced, the disruptions intensified. Supply drones failed to synchronize. Energy use rose without explanation. Combat algorithms returned conflicting recommendations, forcing commanders to rely on instinct. Even worse, far from the battlefield, the Empire's infrastructure began to falter. Orbital systems failed in sequence. Financial networks slowed, triggering panic. Civilian power grids strained under unexplained inefficiencies. There was no clear sign of attack, no enemy to accuse. The invasion stalled. Orders were revised, then withdrawn. Command authority fractured. Within 2 days, the Empire ordered a retreat, not from defeat, but impossibility. After the fleets withdrew, humans released a brief statement. The colony had activated a defensive protocol designed to preserve life by disabling hostile operations. At a systemic level, no ships were destroyed. No worlds were damaged, yet the Empire took decades to recover. The galaxy understood the message. Human defense did not repel invasions. It quietly dismantled everything that made invasion possible. The aftermath of the failed invasion forced the Galactic Assembly into a state of collective unease. No treaties had been broken in any conventional sense, yet an empire had been pushed to the edge of collapse, without a single battle being fought. Trade slowed across multiple sectors as governments reassessed their assumptions about power and security. The question was no longer whether humans were dangerous, but whether the galaxy could afford to misunderstand them again. Emergency committees were formed, composed of strategists, historians, and legal scholars from dozens of species. Their task was unprecedented: to define limits for a form of warfare that did not resemble war at all. Traditional laws regulated weapons, territory, and combatants. None of them accounted for a species capable of dismantling conflict by destabilizing the systems that supported it. Human representatives were invited to participate. They attended every session, answered every question, and offered no resistance. This, more than anything, unsettled the Assembly. A species accused of possessing unmatched strategic power should have defended its sovereignty. Instead, humans listened, as they always did. During the debates, historians presented projections based on reconstructed simulations. In every scenario where humans fully committed to a conflict, the outcome was the same. The war ended quickly, but the damage extended far beyond the battlefield. Economies collapsed, governments fragmented, entire regions of space entered prolonged periods of instability. Even allies suffered unintended consequences simply by being connected to the conflict. The conclusion was unavoidable. If humans ever fought without restraint, the galaxy would not survive in any recognizable form. When the final proposal was drafted, it carried a designation never before used. Rather than being numbered among standard interstellar statutes, it was labeled foundational. The law did not regulate human behavior so much as it acknowledged a reality the galaxy could not change. Humans were forbidden from participating in interstellar wars. The wording was precise. Humans could defend themselves. They could provide humanitarian aid. They could assist in rebuilding after conflicts ended. But they could not be combatants, commanders, or strategic contributors in any declared war. The penalty for violating the law was immediate collective intervention, regardless of alliances. When the law was presented to the human delegation, the chamber expected protest. Instead, the human envoy simply nodded. "We understand," they said. "This is why we avoided war in the first place." The law was passed unanimously. As it was entered into the Galactic Archives, an Eldari archivist added a private annotation, sealed for future generations. It read, "This law exists not to protect the galaxy from humans, but to protect the galaxy from what war becomes when humans decide to end it." Centuries passed after the law was enacted, and for most of the galaxy, it faded into accepted reality. New species rose, old empires declined, and wars continued in distant regions, smaller, more cautious, tightly regulated by treaties shaped around a single absence. Humans were never present on battlefields. Their ships appeared only after ceasefires, delivering aid, rebuilding stations, and restoring shattered networks. To younger civilizations, the law forbidding humans from war felt ceremonial, a relic of ancient fear rather than practical necessity. That illusion ended at a military academy on the edge of coalition space. A young cadet studying interstellar law paused over a single line in an otherwise crowded archive. "Humans, prohibited from warfare under Foundational Statute 001. Curious, the cadet asked their instructor why such a restriction still mattered when humanity had spent centuries avoiding conflict. The instructor did not answer immediately. Instead, they accessed a sealed archive and projected fragments of simulations onto the classroom display. These were not battles in the traditional sense. No fleets collided, no worlds burned. Instead, lines representing economies, communication, energy distribution, and social cohesion twisted and collapsed in rapid succession. "This," the instructor said, is what happens when humans stop restraining themselves. The cadets watched as simulated wars ended in hours, not years. Governments dissolved. Alliances failed without being attacked. Civilizations didn't lose battles. They lost the ability to organize, to trust information, to coordinate action. Even after hostilities ceased, recovery never fully came. The damage wasn't physical, it was structural. A student asked the obvious question: why didn't humans use this power to rule the galaxy? The answer was simple and unsettling. Humans understood the cost better than anyone. Their own history proved that once systems were broken deeply enough, rebuilding them took generations, sometimes centuries. Control gained that way was meaningless. There would be nothing left to govern. In the final recording, an elderly human strategist addressed the assembly long ago. Their words preserved but rarely replayed. "Other species fight to win," the recording said. "We fight to make sure the same war never happens again." That difference terrifies you. It terrifies us too. The instructor closed the archive. "That is why the law exists," they told the cadets. "Not because humans crave war, but because when they are forced into it, they don't stop at victory. They stop at certainty. Far beyond the academy, on Earth, humanity continued its quiet role among the stars, silent not from weakness but from choice. The galaxy endured because that choice was never taken away. The law forbidding humans from war held firm for generations, shaping military doctrine across the galaxy. Most species adapted by designing conflicts that could end quickly, knowing that escalation might draw attention they did not want. Over time, the presence of humans became a stabilizing absence, a reminder that some lines, once crossed, could not be uncrossed. Yet not everyone accepted the law as necessary. A coalition of younger civilizations, ambitious and skeptical of ancient fears, began to question the stories. To them, humanity's reputation felt exaggerated, inflated by old archives and cautious elders. Humans had not fought a war in living memory. They rebuilt shattered worlds and spoke endlessly about cooperation. To the skeptics, this looked less like restraint and more like irrelevance. Quietly, the coalition authorized a classified project, using fragments of publicly available human data and reconstructed historical records. They attempted to simulate human-style strategic intervention. The goal was not to attack anyone, but to test the validity of the fear. Could humans truly dismantle a war without firing a shot? Or was the galaxy clinging to a myth? The simulation began with a limited conflict between two fictional empires. At first, the model behaved as expected. Fleets clashed, resources drained, casualties mounted. Then the researchers introduced a simplified version of human doctrine, minor adjustments to logistics, communication efficiency, and information flow. The change was immediate and alarming. As efficiency increased, resilience vanished. The simulated empires lost their ability to adapt. Small disruptions triggered massive failures. Command structures froze, unable to reconcile conflicting data. Economic strain spread faster than military losses. Within days of simulated time, the war ceased not through victory, but through paralysis. The researchers tried again, adjusting parameters, adding safeguards. Each iteration ended the same way. When the human model was allowed to operate freely, the conflict collapsed entirely. In later runs, the simulated civilizations themselves disintegrated long after the war ended. Unable to restore trust or coordination, the project was terminated. The final report was sealed and transmitted to the Galactic Assembly under emergency protocols. Its conclusion was brief: the threat posed by unrestricted human strategic engagement exceeded acceptable risk levels by orders of magnitude. The younger civilizations that had authorized the project issued a formal apology. No punishment followed, none was needed. The data spoke for itself. Humans were never informed of the experiment. They continued their work as they always had, repairing trade networks, advising on disaster recovery, and quietly promoting redundancy over efficiency. The galaxy slept a little easier, knowing the myth had been tested and proven dangerously real. Over the centuries, humans never questioned the law that forbade them from participating in interstellar war. They did not protest or argue. Their role in the galaxy remained humanitarian and scientific, centered on exploration, diplomacy, and rebuilding systems damaged by conflict. To most species, this behavior made humans seem cautious, even timid, patient, helpful, and restrained. That restraint, however, was intentional. Humans understood war better than any other species. They knew that their involvement would not bring simple victories but systemic collapse. Empires would fall, alliances would break, and civilizations could lose the ability to recover. They did not need weapons or fleets. Their deep understanding of systems, logistics, and interdependence was more powerful than any armament. From time to time, ambitious commanders tested this restraint. They believed centuries of peace had weakened humanity and that the law existed only out of fear. They were always wrong. Humans anticipated such arrogance long before it appeared. Instead of responding with force, humanity demonstrated vulnerability without violence. Communications were subtly redirected. Supply chains were adjusted. Routine orders exposed how fragile complex systems truly were. Each time, potential aggressors realized their understanding of control and war was fundamentally flawed. The Galactic Assembly eventually recognized that human restraint was voluntary and ethical. Humans chose limitation, not weakness. Their silence proved more intimidating than open aggression. The law was not meant to restrain humanity. It existed to protect everyone else. As decades turned into centuries, the legend of humanity's restraint became both a cautionary tale and a philosophical cornerstone across the galaxy. Younger species grew up hearing stories about the silent species, about how humans could end wars without firing a single shot, and about the law that forbade them from participation. To some, these were myths, exaggerated accounts meant to impress the curious or frighten the ambitious. But as the galaxy's archives grew fuller, patterns began to emerge that no historian could ignore. The new generation of military cadets, diplomats, and scholars often debated the meaning of the law in classrooms and lecture halls. Many wondered why humans, who had never overtly sought conquest or dominance, were treated as untouchable in matters of war. Some believed that the law was a relic, a ceremonial acknowledgement of old fears that had lost relevance. Others suspected that the legends underestimated the true scale of human capabilities. Curiosity eventually turned into careful study. Simulation programs were developed to model human strategic methodology, though only fragments of data were ever available to outsiders. The results astounded even the most confident researchers. In every simulated engagement where humans were present, the war did not unfold according to conventional expectations. Armies that had been organized for decades became disoriented. Fleets that had never failed in coordination suddenly faltered. Supply lines, communications, and command hierarchies collapsed under pressure that would have been trivial under normal circumstances. The conclusions were chilling. Humans did not fight in the way the galaxy understood war. They did not seek victory over soldiers or planets. Instead, they dismantled the very structure that allowed conflict to exist. The law forbidding their participation was not an arbitrary restriction, it was a safeguard against total systemic collapse. Older historians, those who had access to centuries-old archives, reminded the young cadets that humanity's restraint was a deliberate choice. They had learned, through millennia of near extinction, events that unrestrained power could destroy everything, including themselves. Their silence was not weakness, it was discipline. Ethical judgment and strategic foresight intertwined. By the end of the discussions, even the most skeptical students understood the unspoken truth. Humans had reshaped the rules of war without ever engaging in one. Their absence on the battlefield was as meaningful as their presence could have been. They had created a deterrent unlike any other, a civilization so capable that the simple knowledge of their potential could prevent wars before they began. And in that understanding, the galaxy finally accepted what generations of elders had warned. Humanity was forbidden from war, not because they lacked the ability, but because when they did fight, the very concept of war ceased to exist. Centuries had passed since the Galactic Assembly forbade humans from participating in war. Yet the law's importance never faded. While empires rose and collapsed, and conflicts reshaped borders, humans stayed absent from battlefields. Their fleets arrived only after ceasefires, bringing aid, rebuilding infrastructure, and restoring communication to many civilizations. This absence felt reassuring, a sign that although humans were capable of devastation, they chose restraint. That restraint was never passive. It was a conscious choice shaped by ethical judgment and long experience. Humans understood that war relied on trust, coordination, and predictability. Disrupt those foundations, and chaos followed. Destroy them completely, and civilizations collapsed without a single shot fired. History had taught humanity that victory through destruction often left nothing worth ruling. Young officers across the galaxy often questioned why such peaceful beings were forbidden from war. The answer was unsettling. Humans did not fight to win. They fought to eliminate the possibility of conflict itself. Their absence was not weakness, but deterrence. Those who underestimated them faced systemic failure, not through force, but through quiet unraveling. Legends spoke of secret simulations run by ambitious powers. Every result ended the same way, paralysis instead of defeat. Historians later confirmed a pattern. Humans preserved life, avoided conquest, and limited harm. The law existed to protect everyone, because when humans fought, war itself ceased to exist.